Today I wanted to talk about the issues that we have in Kenya about street names and building numbers. For anyone who ever lives in Kenya or visits Kenya, maybe if you live in Kenya you've never noticed, but for visitors to Kenya, the first thing they notice, amongst many other things, is that it's extremely difficult to find your way around, because there are no addresses provided in Kenya. What I mean is that the buildings don't have numbers and the streets don't have names. So if you're trying to describe to someone where you live or where you stay, it is a very difficult process of trying to use landmarks. Go to that corner and then you'll see a small kiosk that is blue, and then go around the kiosk and then go up the hill and then turn left a little bit, and it's a very tedious process. Yet if you had a physical number and a street name, you could easily tell someone, just go to 1, 2, 3, 4 Samburu Lane and you'll find my house there. And so this is something that I wanted to talk about because it bothers me. It bothers me because it's one of those things that shows how third world a country is. If you want to tell how bad a country is, you look at the presence of slums, how people drive, and whether the streets have names. That's how you can tell. Those are the three indicators that tell you how bad a country is, how third world it is. And for some reason, Kenya remains an extremely third world country. Now, when you think about all the government agencies, all the different people who are involved in sustaining this problem, it makes you wonder about certain things about Kenya. And that's what we wanted to look at today. Because my interest at all times is always in the psychology of the rulers and the psychology of the people, like the people who live in third world countries, the people who live in highly unsuccessful countries, the people who live in highly dysfunctional countries. I'm always curious to find out what's going on inside their brains, because it is them who sustain the horror show in which they live. No one does it to them, they do it to themselves. So I'm always interested in understanding the thinking patterns and the mind of third world people. And Kenya is a very good example of what a typical non-thriving third world country is. Now, let's go back to the issue of street names and numbering. Now, why is it important to give street names? Whether the street is paved or unpaved, it makes no difference. You need to give it a name. I mean, can you have a child and not give the child a name? How would you call the child? Now, even so in that sense, when you give birth to new neighborhoods as a community, you're creating new neighborhoods, right? You're creating new roads. Whether they're paved or unpaved is irrelevant. It's a road, it exists, people use it. Why would you not give that road a name? How many trillions does it cost to give a name? Because when you talk to the rulers, their excuse for not doing anything, for not working, is money. They say they can't afford it. So how many trillions or billions does it cost to give a street a name? Now, let's look at all the problems that are created by not having street names. Now, when you're doing a delivery business, and now there's a new economy in the service sector of delivering things to people, right? Think of the difficulties of delivering anything in Kenya or Nairobi or any town in Kenya. It makes no difference. You've received an order, you want to deliver the order. And we have all these online companies that are trying to come up. And they can tell you the horrors in trying to make a timely and efficient, cost-effective delivery, because they can't really find the actual building address because it doesn't exist. So they have to rely on physical description. And you can imagine how tough that is if you've never been to a place and you're going to multiple places and you're under the pressure of time to locate a particular building when you don't know the street name or the number of the building. And so for them, they have to keep on doing multiple redeliveries. They have to keep on attempting to deliver the same item over and over, because the first time they go, they could not find the building. So they have to move on to the other stop that they have. And then they have to redeliver or attempt to redeliver another day at their own cost. So the cost of trying to deliver the same item multiple times, now if you scale it towards a large business, it becomes extremely expensive. All because there are no street names. There are no street numbers. Now when you also think of critical situations, for example, there's an emergency. You're in your house. You've come under attack. Either maybe there's a fire, or maybe you're being attacked by thugs, and you need to call the police. How do you tell them where you are? It's almost impossible. And it's at night. Maybe it's raining. How do you tell the police, I am located at this place? How can they possibly find you? See, they cannot find you. Even when they are willing to come, it is so difficult to find you that they show up after 3 hours. And maybe they are just a kilometer away, yet they cannot find you. Because it's impossible. No numbers, no names. It's guesswork. Do you see how horrible this is? If it's an ambulance, you're having an emergency, you're having a heart attack, a stroke, something is going on with you in terms of health. How do you tell the ambulance where you are? How do they know to come and get you? It's almost impossible. Why? Your house doesn't have a number, and the street in front of your house doesn't have a name. So how can you live in a country like that? And I always wonder to myself, and I know people say this is so arrogant, but really I do wonder to myself, how many other people in Kenya have noticed that not having street names and numbers to buildings is a problem? How many of you have noticed that? And if you did notice it, did it bother you? Does it bother you at all? Have you thought that this is something that maybe should be corrected? Or you never noticed at all? And if you did not notice, what is it about you that makes you not notice this level of disorder? Now, other problems created are the problem of keeping legal documents, especially when it comes to things of concerning real estate. Because when you have such a chaotic way of doing things, even trying to maintain records across time becomes so difficult. Because many times you're like, when you're looking at land documents, when you're looking at, maybe you're trying to buy a house, sell a house, when you're looking at all those documents, it becomes very difficult to know, is this the same house they're talking about in 2005 that existed in 1986? Is it the same house? Is it in the same place? Because the street doesn't have a name. Are we talking about the same thing? And even when you're trying to track people across time, for example, when you look at your ID, what is the address on your ID? There's no address. They just put something strange, like maybe a village or something. Like, there's no address. So what if you're trying to locate people? Or you're trying to track people across time? For any reason. It is almost impossible, because you can never tie the people to any particular address because it doesn't exist. So legally, many people in Kenya are just floating around with no fixed address. So you can imagine proving a case in court that it's you, and you don't have a fixed address. And these things do happen when people are having cases about land and things of that nature. You can't even prove that it was you that was there at that time. Because where are you going to say you were? If someone was to ask you, where were you living 10 years ago? Tell me the place you were living 10 years ago. You'll start a very long story. Oh, I was living around this corner. You can never give me an address because you don't have an address. This is the problem. You cannot even track yourself over time for any reason. Can't even prove where you were in case you get caught up in a particular situation and you need to prove where you were. Almost impossible, because you've never had an address at any point in your life. You're just floating around there. Now, Let us consider all the agencies that could be held responsible for this nasty situation. Now, we have the local post office, the local police department, we have the real estate companies, we have the city council, we have the county council or the county government, we have the companies that provide electricity and water, which would be, in the case of Nairobi, would be Nairobi sewage, whatever, that company, and Kenya Power, okay, and also the local hospitals. Now, many of these are government departments, and these are the people who in their daily activities use a lot of physical address system. For example, Kenya Power has software that shows the GPS of every building that they provide electricity to. They have the entire map, and it is from those maps, that data, that you can build a mapping system, because they have, wherever they provide electricity, they know exactly where it is, and they have the digital maps. So that is a resource that can be used to map out the city and to even name it and put numbers on every building. So the data is there. But what I want to focus on is, think of all these agencies, from the governments, the main government, the county governments, the city governments, the town governments, the village governments, the chiefs, all these people, the post office, the police. These are the people who are supposed to initiate the naming and numbering system, because it would help them in their day-to-day activities. But for some reason, that never happens. And so my interest is in the psychology of that. Think of how many people are involved, yet the system is a total failure. So you mean to tell me all these groups have never noticed the need to have a naming and numbering system? They've never noticed it at all. And it's been 60 years of flag independence. No one has ever noticed. Yet they are hampered in their day-to-day activities because of the lack of physical addresses. Now, when you go to the county government and you ask them plainly, why haven't you named the streets? How many trillions do you need? Why wouldn't they do it? Well, they won't do it because, again, in Africa and in Kenya, Africans never initiate anything. They must be given instructions by someone, unless a foreigner comes to Kenya and tells the government, now, name the streets, give the building numbers. They won't do it until they are told. There's total lack of initiative. So how do you explain that? When you go to the city planning department and you talk to the people there and you ask them, have you been educated? They'll say yes. Do you have a degree? Yes. I have a degree in urban planning. Really? Yes. I even have a PhD. Really? And in all your learning, in all your going to school, they never taught you the importance of giving street names. Never. They never mentioned that. So how do you explain the fact that all these departments are run by people who are presumably educated, yet there's total chaos? How do you explain that? What is the psychology of ineptitude and incompetence? When you meet these people who are in charge of all these sectors, are they normal people? What could be wrong? Is it education or is it IQ? What is missing? There has to be something wrong. You see, this chaos that you find in third world countries, how do you explain it? Even simple things like giving a street a name, it doesn't cost anything. It doesn't cost billions, but they still won't do it until a foreigner comes and tells them, now, let's start a project to give every street a name for ease of navigation for everyone. They won't do it until they're given orders. So how do you explain that? You who works in those departments, how do you explain your own incompetence? I don't understand that. And what is really surprising, let me tell you, what is really surprising is this, that these people travel outside Kenya. They go to other countries. How come they never see that in developed countries, everything is orderly? If you want to find an address, you type in the number and the street name, and you can easily find yourself there. How come they don't see that? And many of them have lived outside Kenya for years. How come they don't see that and adopt that system of naming things for ease of finding those things? So you keep on wondering. Let's say there's sewage overflowing in a particular place, and you call the city council and you tell them, well, there's a broken manhole here and the sewage is flowing all over. How do you tell them where that place is? Doesn't have a name, nothing. So how do you tell them where you are? And how much effort will it take for you to be able to direct them to where the problem is? So how can you live like that as a city government? Now, does that make sense to you? Does it make sense to you that we have hundreds of people who are in charge of all these county governments? Hundreds of people who work for the post office, hundreds of people who work for the police departments, hundreds of people who work for the emergency services like ambulances. How do you explain all of them living within this chaos? How do you explain the failure to think? What is it? See, there has to be something wrong upstairs. There has to be something wrong. There must be something wrong. Now the question is this: what is wrong? Because whatever is wrong is the reason why Africa fails. Because how do you explain that? It's not a question of money. It's not a question of anything. So what is the issue? Why can't they give street names? And let me tell you, even the people who, buy huge chunks of land and then divide it to sell it, in any other situation, in any other country, they would not be allowed to subdivide land and sell it piece by piece without giving every road that they create a name. They're supposed to give names to every single road that they create when they cut up, when they subdivide the land. They're not supposed to sell the land having plots and the roads are not named. But in Kenya, they are allowed to do that. So they keep on selling these anonymous pieces of land. You cannot even locate it at all. It is almost impossible to locate it. Someone has to hold you by the hand and take you there. And it doesn't have a name. So how do you explain all these people? Because vast numbers of land have been subdivided. How do you explain that even though it is not a legal requirement, that the people who are doing, and these are people who work for government, who do the subdividing? I mean, if you knew the process, the way they take the chunk of land and cut it up, and like the government is very, very government intensive. You have to keep on going back to the government to get approval, to get this, until they finally produce the title deed for each and every piece of land. So throughout that process, you mean to tell me all these people don't notice that it would be more efficient and effective to give the street names? And all these people have degrees, all of them. But some of the brain doesn't work. So the question we keep on asking is, why doesn't the brain work? What is missing in their brains? How can you live in this level of chaos? And this is very typical of third world countries. And you almost cannot explain it. So that anyone who is a visitor to a third world country, they're just struck by the low level thinking that is predominant across the entire society. And for the people themselves, the population themselves, you who struggle to find your own house, how come you've never demanded that all the streets to be named? How come you never initiate the process of naming your own street where you live? How come? And you're a business owner, right? You want your customers to find you, right? But you don't have a street name. Don't you think it's more advantageous if you had an actual street name, so that you can direct your customers very easily to you? How come that never occurs to anyone? So those are the things that bother me. And I cannot find any logical answer. I don't understand that at all.
Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe and comment below. Kenya's time has come. Our time has come. Your time has come. A time to succeed and not fail. A time to grow wealth and not poverty. A time to go up and not down. It's time for you to stop walking and drive your car. Stop renting and buy yourself a house. It's your time to get blessed. Join the CCV movement and together let us kick poverty and unemployment out of Kenya. Become a member today. Donate what you can. And remember that the CCV is the only political organization in Kenya that is squarely built upon Christian values, unlike the rest. We'll see you next time. Thank you.